Hello, I'm David Puttnam, and I'm going to be part of this event in a few minutes, talking about setting out my own vision for what I think the future is for NHTV and for the industry in general. But at this point, it's simply my pleasure to introduce myself. I'm the Chancellor of the Open University. I was for 30 years a so-called independent film producer, although most of the work I did happened to be for Warner Brothers, working out of the US. I had a fantastic career, very happy career. And for the last 15 years, I've been involved in the world of education, mostly in the UK, but not exclusively. And I'm now particularly focused on the area of technology, and the role that technology can play in education, and the way in which, hopefully, I can bring my own skills and my own experience from my past life into this new and very exciting world. And it's a world that NHTV have already managed to take a big slice of. It's an extraordinary organisation, as you know only too well. Over 10 years ago, it became an international player, managed to, by quite a large margin, be the preeminent organisation in Holland, an institution, and recognised as such. But we're moving to a world where staying ahead is every bit as tough, in some senses as tough as making a reputation in the first place. So this series of conversations and seminars is a good opportunity, I think, to look at the challenges that lie ahead. And my job, essentially, is to encourage you, but also to wish the institution all the luck in the world in attempting to stay with the programme in order to stay with a really successful, viable 21st century learning institution and take advantage of the opportunities that are out there. And those are the opportunities I'm going to be talking about in just a few moments. For now, it's my pleasure to introduce Tony, who's going to take you through his vision, very articulate and very well-known and well-respected vision of the future. And hopefully, some or maybe all of that will dovetail with what I'm going to have to say in just a few minutes. So enjoy, Tony, and I'll be back with you shortly. Okay, well, it's my turn to put in my fourpenneth in terms of the way I think things are going or are likely to go. You've heard from Tony, you've heard from Masha, and very helpfully I was given 4 questions, specific questions, to attempt to answer. So I'll run through those one at a time. The first was, what challenges is the media industry facing in the global economy? Short answer is enormous challenges, but the media industry is a pretty broad church, so let me just segment it slightly. Let's start with TV. I just finished a 6-year term as Deputy Chairman of Channel 4 in the UK. So in a sense, I was very fortunate being through a transitional phase for television. When I started at the channel, it was essentially one channel with a small catch-up version and film on 4, but a relatively small operation based on a single channel. Today, it's a family of channels, a whole group of channels offering different times, different needs to different people. A very, very different animal, if you like. And I think we have achieved that transition rather securely. Overall, the portfolio achieves a larger audience than the original channel did when I first went there, although the actual audience for the single channel has decreased along with all the others. So a very different kind of scenario. I think the most interesting thing we did during those 6 years was invest quite heavily in data collection. And we moved the whole thing from being a mass medium, a mass audience medium that just put out programs, started pretty well all day and into the evening, to a mass audience, to a much more selective medium that actually treated its audience as individual customers. Now this is a small change, but it's a massive change. The idea of a TV audience as individual customers was unthinkable, even maybe 5 years ago. But what we've now got is over 4 million addressable human beings. We have a clear sense of what their preferences are, what they like to watch, when they like to watch it, when they're available, the kind of catch-up programs they like. We know much, much more about them. And the truth is, in years to come, we're going to know much, much more again. This is something in its infancy. But this was a big bet for Channel 4. It was a big, big jump in a pool that we weren't quite sure how deep it was. But I think it's exactly the right thing to do. So I see the evolution of television as being much more customised and much more segmented, and basically going in the direction, I suppose it's been drifting, but going in that direction a lot faster. So television is changing both the TV promoted end of television and the public broadcasters such as the BBC. It is changing very rapidly. BBC, I think, has been very well run the last few years and has, for example, used its online presence magnificently sometimes to the fury of its competitors. Okay, from TV, let's go to newsprint, where things are changing very dramatically and where the old business model is not just under threat, it's probably busted. The idea of newspapers as we knew them, moving on into the middle part even of the 21st century, I think is a fantasy. Some newspapers more than others are beginning to gravitate online. Some are developing business models that appear to work. I certainly know, for example, that I am now a daily reader of the New York Times. I'm very, very happy to pay for it. The New York Times was unavailable to me in essence, again, 5, certainly 10 years ago. So my own reading habits have changed. I very seldom buy a newspaper now, maybe once, twice a week, if that. I basically, all my newsprint is, all my news information is gathered online. Same old newspaper, I still read The Guardian, but I read it online. So Guardian and New York Times offer me a lot. And those, together with the BBC online constant news, 24-hour news, are my means of information. Probably should be a bit wider than that. If I were a little more adventurous, I should begin to drift out a little wider than that. I read some magazines online, not a lot. So the whole world of print media is evolving very rapidly. I wouldn't even want to speculate which are going to be successful, what business models are going to prove to be sustainable. I'm not sure. But what I do know is that the model we'll be looking at in 2025 will be a very, very different one from anything that exists today. Moving on to film, area where I feel a little more secure. Last year, 2012, box office in the UK was very healthy. I can talk with some knowledge of the UK because I got all the figures a couple of days ago. So I know what happened to the UK. UK had a very good year. Total revenues, I think, 1.27 billion, or maybe a little under that. A very big number, 3.7% up on 2011, and 2011 itself was a record year. So at the box office, it's looking pretty bright. Admissions down, I think, very slightly. Certainly not up by anything like 3.7%. But this is an industry that's holding its own. People still seem to want to go out to the movies. The experiences can be very heightened and very exciting. The business model there, the relationship between cinema exhibitors and distributors is not that comfortable or even healthy. It is what it is, but I don't think anyone's that necessarily happy with it. And I don't see that as being a business model that's going to extend much beyond, let's say, I'm guessing here, 2020. I had a very interesting experience last year. Tying in with the Olympic Games, I re-released Chariots of Fire, a film I made 30 years ago. And it was fascinating in that we were able to get a pretty healthy advertising budget together, and we used that advertising budget to promote the hell out of the film in 100 cinemas. But that was enough to generate reviews and enough excitement, which in turn delivered download sales and Blu-ray DVD sales. So all in all, I think the exercise was a very profitable one and a smart one. But the revenues didn't come from anything like the areas that one would have expected them to a decade ago. So again, a world that's going through a transitional phase in terms of its business model. But probably not as troubled or not in quite as much difficulty as some other areas of the media. One thing that is a little worrying is the drop, quite substantial drop this year, 17% overall in DVD sales. And that clearly Blu-ray isn't managing to make up the difference. On the other hand, download went through the $1 billion mark for the first time in 2012. So although it hasn't quite caught up with the losses in DVD, it's beginning to. So I would say of all the sectors, probably the movie industry is the one where you could actually look forward for the next 10, 15 years with the most confidence. There is a caveat to that. An enormous amount of the revenues generated in 2012 came from just a very few movies. Skyfall, for example, was 8.5% of the total UK box office. One movie. Probably not more than 4 or 5 movies accounted for 25%. That isn't healthy, especially in a marketplace that actually released over 600 movies. So you've got this enormously long tail of underperforming movies, some of which were very, very good indeed. I mean, for my money, one of the best films I saw last year was Rust and Bone, French film. Amour is a wonderful film.
The Untouchables is a wonderful film. So 3 outstanding French films last year, which between them would have made a very, very small dent, not so much in the French box office, but in the UK box office. So something is going to give, without doubt. The industry will have to rationalise this enormous plethora of 600 movies in a situation where those movies are themselves fighting for an ever smaller percentage, overall percentage, of the box office pie. So that's a big question mark over the movie industry, and one that the industry itself has got to deal with. The games industry, which I know as an institution you're very involved in, didn't have a great year. Sales down a bit. I'd still like to see it be a little more adventurous. The games industry has got to find a way of escaping from the Boise shoot-'em-up games and become more imaginative and somehow align itself better with what's happening in the app world, where apps are becoming very imaginative, where the ability to actually learn and work with and have a different relationship with, for example, my iPad here, isn't something I think the games industry has yet entirely got its head around. It still is relying on a very formulaic process of body counts. Now, this could be an old man talking, it could be my own preferences, but I actually think there's more to it than that. If this is an industry that's going to mature and grow up, it's got to find other worlds to conquer and not just rely on body count. So that's a quick tour around the media that I'm most immediately familiar with, and I'll move on to the second question. Second question is, how does an institution such as NHTV maintain or even build on its position vis-a-vis these changing, very challenging circumstances within the overall media industry? How does it address these changes? How does it take advantage of these changes? And how does it secure a future for the very best of its students? That's an interesting one. First thing I'd have to say is stay ahead of the game technologically. I vividly remember, I was chairman of the National Film and Television School for a long time in the UK, and I vividly remember going, probably around 1980, to see Mr. Morita, who was only the man who owned or certainly ran Sony, and talking to him about the fact that here we had this film school which had very, very poor quality of television equipment, and here we were literally training the next generation of film and television makers on equipment which was almost all outdated. And he understood the problem immediately and was fantastic. And through him, I was able to buy at an amazing cost and effectively re-equip the school with, at that time, state-of-the-art Sony equipment. You've got to do that. At some way or shape or how, I don't quite know how, the institution has got to find the resources to ensure that its students are being trained on the very best, if possible, the next generation of equipment, editing equipment, camera equipment, lighting equipment. There's no point at all in having young people walk onto a set or into a TV studio and start looking at equipment that they've never seen in their life before. That's dumb, when it can't possibly help any institution stay abreast of what's happening. So the first thing is, honestly, equip yourselves to the best possible degree you can, and know that the future of your students is going to depend on how familiar they are with what's happening in technology. The second thing I would say is quality of, obviously, staff. NHTV is lucky. Most of your staff seem to be ex-practitioners, sometimes very, very excellent ex-practitioners who have at different moments in their career been at the top of their game. That's important. And the third thing I'd say is the ethos of the school. This is something that gets discussed, well, I was going to say a lot. I'm not sure it gets discussed enough. Why are you there? What are you there to do? What are you going to do with your life? Is it just a world that you're kind of fascinated by and you want to kind of plunge into or become famous in? Or is it a world in which you have the opportunity to expand your own mind and maybe take the best of the ideas you have and influence your generation to see the world differently, to explore the world differently, and to try and make a difference? These are big, big questions. I'm always saying to my students that in the end, it's all about the choices you make. It's the choices you make in terms of the people you work with, the friends you make, your friends you have, the way you use your time, the subjects you choose to pursue, the way in which you choose to pursue those subjects, the quality of the people around you generally. These are all fundamental choices, and they're your own choices. And the most important thing I think that an institution can do is encourage its students to take those choices very seriously. And when they feel, or when the institution feels that those choices are wrong, is be prepared to step in and help correct them. So ethos, the ethos of the institution, the degree to which the students trust the institution, the degree to which the students feel that their institution understands the world that they're about to, frankly, inhabit, the world that they're going to have to make careers in, and is sufficiently supportive, demanding, and critical, if you like, that they will be, that the students themselves will gain a confidence that they really do have something to offer. You know what's very interesting? Someone asked me the other day why there were so many good, although it's true there are very many good, fine, well-trained actors in Britain. And I said, well, in my experience, and I talked to a lot of them, it's often the fact that these were relatively underperforming people at school. There were people at school who were struggling with traditional learning, traditional knowledge, but who maybe got themselves into the school play or were playing some other role within the school and had somebody say to them, you know, you were very good at that. And it only needs one piece of encouragement at the right moment, especially when it's aligned to something you actually enjoy doing, to give you a passion. And once you've got a passion, if you're lucky, you've got a career. And I think schools that are sensitive to that, institutions that are sensitive to that, will not only attract good people, but actually produce very good people. But it's tougher than I'm making it sound. But that would be my formula for a successful institution for the 21st century. The third question I was asked to address is, what should our students and faculty strive for to be successful in an international industry? There is a one-line answer to that, frankly, it's a one-word answer to that, and that is excellence. Be excellent, because if you are excellent, the industry itself is global and people will recognise your excellence. One of the great advantages of being at a Dutch institution is that your fluency with language, your ability with language, is going to stand you in very, very good stead. There's no question, I think, of all the nations in the world, possibly the Danes are nearly as good. The familiarity of the Dutch with other languages is, certainly from an English standpoint, sensational. So you've got the language, in a sense, cracked. From that point on, it's looking at international comparators. Are you doing work that is as good as any work that's being done anywhere else in the world? Two very interesting recent examples. I saw The Life of Pi a couple of weeks ago. It's a film largely made in Taiwan, with much of the special effects work being done in Taiwan. Now, in one fell swoop, and this is quite extraordinary, the Taiwanese have established themselves as an international quality industry, thanks to Ang Lee, who can probably take on projects, enormous, large-scale projects, that, frankly, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, no one would have dreamt of taking to Taiwan. Similarly, what's been done in New Zealand with the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings movies is extraordinary. I mean, again, Australia and New Zealand, well, both of them actually, but New Zealand in particular, has established itself as a stronghold for the making of a particularly large-scale type of movie, and not just in the special effects area, in the costume area, in other areas of effects. I mean, the Australian and New Zealand commitment in that area is enormous, and New Zealand, I think, has emerged from being an island tucked away deep in the South Pacific to being a real powerhouse when it comes to making a particular type of movie. All the work, essentially, of one man and a few movies. So the world can move very rapidly. If Holland decided to become a world centre for a particular type of filmmaking, I think that's available to it as a country. Certainly, if you look at what David Attenborough has done for the BBC in terms of wildlife and the nature, the world of nature, and what he's done in terms of establishing a personal reputation and a reputation for the channel is quite phenomenal. So these niches, if you can call them niches, they're very big niches, are available, but they're only available to people who are doing things in a globally successful and globally competent way. So I would argue BBC in wildlife, New Zealand in terms of that particular type of special effects represented best by The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and now most recently Taiwan in terms of a particular type of visual effect. These are phenomena, and they're going to generate a lot of jobs, a lot of very satisfying jobs, and a lot of revenues for the countries and the individuals concerned. So so the short answer to the question is just be very, very, very good at what you do. Make sure the rest of the world knows that you're very good at what you do, and just stick with it and tough it out. You know, years ago I remember Steven Spielberg saying to me that his crews of choice were British crews. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. Is it because they're better? He said, no, they're not better. He said, they just travel better. He said, they're more adaptable.
They will deal with tough conditions better than an American crew. And he said it just makes them easier to work with. And my own experience bears that out. I do think it's true that the British crews do travel extremely well. It literally was something that was developed in the 60s and 70s with a lot of big movies made with largely British crews. And the crews developed that ability to, as it were, live off the ground and live in hotels for 3, 4, 5 months on rather less than spectacular food. Turned into a sort of subculture and a sub-industry, if you like. Those are the things I think that make an industry, a country, and an individual globally competitive, just by being special and by being seen to be special. The last question, interestingly, flows very, very naturally from the third question, and that's how is media technology changing the way that we create content, the way in which we teach it, and the way in which we learn? Look, I'm talking to you, this is a pre-recorded interview, but it's being done from a studio in deepest West Cork. I live about as far as you possibly can from the centre of Europe. I'm right on the very, very western edge of Europe. And yet I can teach here, from here, and do teach here in Singapore, in Brisbane, all over the world, interactively and on a very regular basis. The technology allows me to do that. I have a 20 meg broadband connection, which basically allows me to stream video and indeed stream myself anywhere I want to. That's important, and it's also, I think, significant. I have the ability, for example, here, if he was available in New York, I could get Martin Scorsese and I having a conversation with students at NHTV about some aspect of Goodfellas, and I could be interviewing him and he can be talking to you. I mean, all this stuff is now absolutely possible, and the notion of a university or a college or a college of higher education not taking advantage of this type of technology is a nonsense. Here also we cut and create our own content. We stream our own content. My average seminar runs a little under 2 hours. It would tend to contain about 35 minutes of clips. Those clips are made here and drawn from stuff from all over the world, from my old interviews of mine, from movies from the 1930s and 40s, and even contemporary films. So the ability to use and reuse material and to put it across in a compelling way, anywhere, anytime, is massive. I no longer have to get on a plane to be with you, not only in terms of a pre-recorded interview such as this, but frankly, I could be dealing with you anytime, any place you want, interactively. You can be asking me questions, I'll answer them, and it is simple. Cinema and television, in my judgment, are without question the most socially influential mass media of the early 21st century. Over the next 10 sessions, I'm going to try and take you through not just my own career, but the films that influenced me, and I think the films that allowed me to make the choices I made. I'd like to show you a clip of what, for me, is one of the finest documentaries ever made.
Oh, it's blue! It just went red all over!
This is an interview from 25 years ago with Bill Moyers for PBS.
The creative community is supposed to be the group who are pushing, using their strengths, using their power, using their talents to push against what is into what may be.
Now let's interrogate that a bit, and I'd really like to hear from you.
Hello, David.
Hi, David.
Hi, David.
Hi, David. My question relates to how you worked with the key creatives during the process of filming.
On the set, be there at the beginning, be there at the end, and be there when you need it.
Is there still a hunger or an appetite for the mission type films in today's movie-going audience?
What those films were, I would argue, was a salve. They allow people to feel that there was a better world out there and that they themselves were capable of better. And I think that is the role of filmmakers. Politicians, by definition, can never be part of moving society forward because they're always trying to catch up with where society is. Our job, your job, is to move society forward. The film is yours, it's the writers, it's the directors. It has to come from within you. If it doesn't, it's empty and it's a product. Everything is about the choices you make. Everything. Not just the people you work with, the themes you choose, the way in which you conduct your life, the things that are important to you, the way you use your time. It is all about choices. Good night and good luck. Technology is absolutely transformatory. We're already seeing in the US
these multi-line courses, the MOOCs, so-called MOOCs, coming from Coursera and Udacity and other organisations. My own organisation, the Open University, is upping its game. The whole world of learning, of teaching and learning, is changing, and changing very, very quickly. And the institutions that are going to be successful will be those that are able to adapt, change, learn and maintain their standards simultaneously. I don't think there's any possibility, no matter what your reputation is, for an institution of learning in the year 2025 to be as relevant as it was in 2015 if it hasn't dramatically aligned itself to the opportunities offered by new technology. It's going to happen. In some cases it'll happen painfully, in some cases it'll happen joyfully. It will always, I think, tend to happen productively. I sincerely hope so. Anyway, I hope that's been helpful to you. I've enjoyed talking to you, and I hope that at least something I've said is of interest, and I'm glad to have contributed to what clearly has been a fairly interesting series of chats. Look after yourselves, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.